Please welcome executive producer, writer, and director of When They See Us, Ava DuVernay.
Hi, folks. How are you? Thank you. That's kind. Thank you so much. Thank you so much. Thank you. Thank you so much for being here tonight. When you have something like this, you never know if anyone's going to come, and you came, so thank you very, very much. So honored to share this with you. This night is really, really special to me because it's the people that I really made it with, the people that I really depended on to get through this subject matter, every little detail, every little nerdy thing like people like you and me love that no one else cares about. We get to talk about it tonight, and I'm so excited. I saw them backstage, literally took everything I had not to cry, because you know how it is to be in the trenches with folks, and you become a family. So this is my family. I'm going to start with one of my executive producers and my bestie on set, Barry Welsh. We have 3 editors on the project, 3 editors to edit 4 episodes. Episode 3 is edited by this incredible woman named Michelle Tesoro. Sound team, incredible. It was a beautiful team. 2 of our team members from Sound are here tonight. Our re-recording mixer and our sound dialogue editor, Joe DeAngelis and Susan Dudek. Hot off the stages of someone else's movie, but I won't be jealous. Don't tell me whose. I don't want to know. I'll get into the next row is a really rare row, and you'll understand why once you see them all together. I'll start with the music supervisor who has never music supervised, but did all of the music supervision, and worked with me on all of the source throughout the 5 hours. My favorite DJ on KCRW, who I cold called and said, "Ever want a music supervisor?" And he said yes. His name is Aaron Bird, and he killed it. Come on out, Aaron Bird. The 3rd one, yes. Yeah, you haven't done it before, it's okay. Next up we have, gosh, I don't know what to say about him. You'll hear a little bit from him tonight. I think he's a genius, and he's also just a really nice person, which is what matters most. He's our composer, Chris Powers. Chris Powers. Next up, how do you make New York of 2018 look like New York of 1989? It ain't easy, so you have to call in someone who really cares about getting those spaces right, those black spaces right, those Spanish places right. Spanish Harlem, what does it look like? An old black mother's house, what does it look like, you know? It's different than a young black mother's house, right? It's different than an older Latino woman's house. All of those little details were so important. I needed someone who would work with me and care about it, and I found it in a Kim McKenzie. Come on out, Ken. Our production designer. Production designer. You get what I'm saying about this row? Wow. A rare row, okay? They tell you they don't exist, but they do. Another one here. My screenwriting collaborator. My favorite writer right now, anywhere. When I needed someone to work with me on episode 4, which was one that, if you've seen it, you know what it is. If you haven't, you'll see it was very, very unique episode that needed to accomplish a lot. I needed a partner in crime on that, and I called Michael Starberry, my screenwriting co-writer on episode 4. So we're going to talk a little bit. I'm going to try to get my Oprah on. I'm going to do my best. It's not possible. These chairs feel little, huh? They feel small? Okay. Hi, friends. Oh, you guys have the big chairs. We're all here like, Happy to see you all. Gonna jump right into it because I don't have a lot of time. So Barry's from Tribeca Productions, and I had originally gone to Participant, some good friends that I'd worked with in the past, and said, help me secure the life rights of these men, make sure that they're paid and that they're being taken care of while we tell the story. Participant said yes, we became partners, and then we thought, we need help in New York City. I'm from Compton. New York scares me, okay? And so we called, who else do you call in New York, but you call Tribeca. And so Barry, talk to me a little bit about the way you first approached it. You know, you've worked a lot in the streets of New York, but this was a story that was working on another side of town, in Harlem, in predominantly black and brown communities. That was a little bit new. How did you approach it in terms of thinking about how to bring it all together?
It's a good question because I think the first thing about New York is that New York in 2018, 2019, when we're walking on the streets right now, looks nothing like 1989. And certainly up there, I think there's areas that we were shooting in at the top of the park, and the top of the park, 110th Street looks nothing like it did back then either. The park's beautiful and it's pristine, and it looks like Hans Christian Andersen. It doesn't look like the scenes that we were, meeting people, talking to people in the neighborhood that had been there forever. I think that was one of the very key things that we learned early on in scouting, was that people that had lived in Schaumburg back in '89, knew the families, knew the boys, could tell you more than anything that we could have seen in a book, seen in a photo, and it really proved to be something that really became one of the guiding lights in the show, is meet the people, talk to everybody. When we went to bodegas, we went to restaurants, we never met a stranger. People opened up their homes, their apartments. I think that was really the key thing. It was like meeting with people, listening to them, hear them talk about the boys. You really got a great sense of the community we were going to be filming in, and the whole movie's shot on the streets. I mean, that's really what became key. And it's funny, one little quick thing. We walked into somebody's house who's actually in the movie, who plays the barber, Jimmy Gary.
So funny. This is a funny story. Now, no pressure, but tell it funny. Here you go.
So the quick funny version. We knock on some guy's door. He opens the door, and Ava's like, "What are you doing here?" He just got the part for playing the barber in episode 3. If you haven't seen it, if you've seen it, Jimmy Gary Jr.'s apartment plays Antron's Baltimore flat.
His wife had put their apartment on the list for locations. He had auditioned for a job. Just that afternoon, I had cast him, and then I knocked on his door, and we were looking at each other like, what's going on? And so I said, hey. So he didn't know. It was fantastic.
He hadn't gotten the call yet that he got it, but he found it.
Yeah, I told him there that he got the part, and we were shooting. He's like, I hit the jackpot, my life. So thanks, Barry. So Michelle, a lot of people are asking how we edited with 3 editors. Not much different than most television shows. Each editor had a part, but we did have a sense of community in the way that you all were passing material back and forth. I want you to talk a little bit about that, and then I'm going to ask you a specific question about your part.
So it was a bit of a mixture of how a normal television show would work, where we all edited our respective parts, but in this situation, because it felt like a feature, the way you shot it and everything, we collaborated in a way where we all had input on everyone's episode, and we all looked at it because we had, every part did its own thing, and we wanted to make sure that how our prospective episodes were working, that it worked with other people's episodes, and there was some congruency amongst the 3 of us. Plus, I think we just like each other, and we really valued each other's opinions. And
Say their names.
Carolyn Shropshire edited episode 1, which you watched, and Spencer Averick, who edited episodes 2 and 4. So
it was a lot about, they were all editing. I was going back and forth to the different rooms, but at times we would say, gosh, if we edit this with this mood, it will clash with the others. So it was a lot of watching. But specifically about your part, as we get to episode 3, this is your section is when the boys become men. So you had to handle all of the transitions from one to the other. I want you to talk to them about how crazy I acted when you nailed this one part. Do you know which transition I'm talking about?
I do.
Tell them about it.
Wait, well, there's 2.
There's several that I love.
There's 2. Antron, that's the one that I was thinking. Well, so, I mean, the way that it was is, none of the way that the boys transitions were,
Not shot.
they were not shot that way. Like, it wasn't, you saw Raymond transition from a boy to a man, but everybody else, it was sort of separate. So, when we watched it, it was like, I need to feel the emotion of each boy developing and what their connection was, and
This is when the editor says, but you didn't shoot that, so what do you need to do? But she didn't. She said, yes, I will make it happen.
yes. We went through several. I mean, we had cards up of every scenes, and we went through like, what about this and this, and we were throwing up, different cards in different orders, and as soon as we thought, okay, in terms of the ideas of how these scenes came together, what was the supporting footage to try to find that? And so the one that, Ava really always gets emotional every time we see it is the Antron transition. So, his mother is telling him, now I'm forgetting because I'm on the spot, but, she's telling him that,
Love you enough to make up for everybody else.
yes.
Don't think you're alone. That whole piece, right?
Yes.
And then it goes from the boys.
It goes from them
Mhm.
to holding hands in the wide shot to the leaves, I believe.
Mhm.
So it's a shot that, because Terry was always asking for these textured shots, to help with transitions, and this was one that I had found that was the leaves to the barbed wire of the gate that was a rack focus, and I was like, well, I think this is gonna work. Let's try this. So, and it cut to Linda McRae, and her face lights up, and we follow a man from behind. We don't know who it is, and we reveal that it's Antron, and it's just a very
Yeah, it's a big moment. It's the boy she was just talking to. Now you see her again, and the man walks out. Sounds slight, but when it happens in the film, you're just like, oh God, I can't breathe. I'm crying. Great job, Michelle. Great job, Michelle. So we move on to sound, which is just, why am I always rushing when I get to the sound stages? I'm always rushing. It's the last thing. You're
You're out of time.
tired. You've been shooting for 99 years. You're beat down. You drag into the sound stages, and you just need love. You just want a smile and a nice, and not always, you don't always get it. Sometimes you get grouchy guys, and girls and ladies, but these folks always put me back together again when I went in there, and they work so hard. So Joe and Susan, talk to me a little bit about the atmosphere that you created and the layering that we did, Joe, and then I'll get into what we did, Susan.
Well, my effects mixer, Chris, and Bruce Terrace, our effects editor, really created the sounds of the city and the different ambiances and the different places of the city, the park versus Manhattan versus the inner city versus Harlem versus, all the different locations. And then we had the music to balance against it, and it was always a matter of, okay, we're changing here, what are we gonna lead with? What are we gonna hear? Are we going to lead with music? Are we going to let the city play? And of course, we have intricate dialogue going on in the middle of the city, so it was always a challenge to get all that ambience up. But when we got to the personal moments, we had to strip it away subliminally so no one noticed it, but we could focus in on what was really going on because the acting was so strong. The story was so good. You really wanted to hear everything.
One of the things I loved about you is I would say, sometimes you get in and a mixer wants to mix. That's what they do. They mix. They want to push things up. He'd say, you know what? You just let him talk here. It's so beautiful. I look over, he had a little tear in his eye. You shouldn't have anything here. I was like, nothing here? No, just a little room tone. That's such an artist, a painterly touch with sound. Really, really, I appreciate it. You did a beautiful work.
Thank you.
Really, really beautiful work. Restraint was a big part of it. Bravo. Now, Susan and I would get into it a little bit. Because Susan's job is clean dialogue.
Oh yeah.
Clean dialogue. And it took us a little bit to get on the same page about, and she was great because once we hooked into each other, it was really, you know what? we're going to keep it dirty to preserve the performances. So talk a little bit about that struggle and how you were able to prioritize your job, which is to make it audible, when I'm saying, don't touch it, don't do ADR. I love it when he says it like this. I mean, I was a real brat when it came to, don't change it.
No, because I don't really remember that struggle. Because
No.
I am actually totally on, that's my usual way.
I felt like I was always saying, don't re-record. Yeah.
Right, because
Yeah.
you know, we have to ask.
Yeah.
This is really dirty, so what do you want to do with it? We can do that, or we
I was
can
always
no,
saying that thing.
Absolutely. Well, I totally support that, and I usually do, especially with this, when you've got these young kids who are so strong. You know you're not going to get that back. I mean, you can't go into a studio and re-record these kids and expect, or even any of the adults. Some of it was just such intense scenes and such wonderful emotion. You just can't go in there and say, oh, let's just change that line. That would just be a disaster. So we really had to work, because you were shooting multiple cameras, and so a lot of times the lavs were the only thing that was available, and the lavs were a lot of times messed up because you were running long takes, and it was
Stuff
very...
in the park that you saw, imagine 30 real boys running through, and Susan's like,
Yeah.
what? I mean, it's somehow we got it clean enough.
Well, we also added a lot of group ADR. We had a lot of great kids come in, and we redid a ton of stuff, and that was fantastic. There was
Shout out our Luke.
Our loop group is Barbara Harris, and
Great.
she did a fantastic job.
Good job.
Just beautiful
Yeah, it was really
actors came in, and they were just, especially the boys who came in and did all the, the park and all the call-outs.
You should shout out your
Great
company
stuff.
too.
Pardon me?
Company.
My company?
Where do you all work?
Oh, I'm just freelance.
Where do you work, sir?
Technicolor.
Yes, thank you.
Right across the street.
Yes, yes.
The big
I get
building.
a discount on the next one because
Just call Technicolor.
Thank you, good call. So we're moving on to this row of unicorns. I love this row. I wish I had my camera right now because I take pictures, but hopefully someone else is. I'm proud of you all. I'm proud of you because you are not supposed to be here. And we are all told that you don't even really exist. That they can't find you. That they've tried. They've looked. Just can't find any. Can't find any young black men or people of color or women or anyone who's a little bit different. So I'm so proud of everyone here in the array of people we have. And sometimes when people tell you that, you have to get creative. So that's what I encourage everyone here to do, because I think you're forward-thinking people. Sometimes you have to think out of the box to find people who may have expertise in another area that's applicable to what you want. There are a lot of ways that we can do that and encourage new people to come into our industry that keeps it fresh and alive and keeps it growing, right? That's what we did with Aaron Bird. So I like KCRW, and I really like Aaron Bird. And I had some great luck with calling a KCRW DJ that I like, Morgan Rhodes, a few years ago, and invited her to be a music supervisor on a few films I did. She did Selma. She did a few other films for me, straight off the radio. Music supervisor, they need someone who does music, who knows music. Why not bring in some fresh new people? So what went through your mind when I called? And then when I called again and again, and by the end of the project, we had logged like 500 calls. How did the last call feel compared to the first call?
The last call felt great.
Middle?
The first call felt great. I mean, honestly, I couldn't believe you even knew who the hell I was. So it was all a pleasant surprise, and I think I sort of benefited from being a bit naive. I didn't really know what I was getting into, but I jumped
It's
in.
also helpful.
Yeah. So yeah, it was all great. All phone calls were great.
Yeah.
Whenever Auntie Ava calls, it's a good day.
You work closely with Jennifer Monar. Talk a little bit about that process of working with the music editor. And that was new for you. It's not just picking music, but it's laying in the ways in which we worked on some key cues.
It was all pretty new. I mean, it was a steep learning curve for me because everything was new for me, and so it wasn't always just about, oh, I think this song works here. You had to choose the right lyric at the right moment. There's a reason why they describe it as sync. And what was nice about working with Jen is she's a musician. She understands music theory. So sometimes I would have an idea, she would present something that would be a bit better. Sometimes it would be a combination of the two, and it allowed us to present the best execution of whatever ideas we had.
And then you pick the perfect thing. You think it's fantastic. You got the right lyric in the right moment. We're in the editing room. We're like this. We're geniuses. This is fantastic. Then you go to license it, and we can't have it. What'd you do then? Why did you show me if I can't have it? Oh, right. We should have done that first.
No, I tell you what, there were a lot of people that were really happy that I had to be the bad guy to tell you, oh, we can't use that. No, it just meant my mom, who's actually in the audience, she raised it. She said, you know, if you ever hear no, it just means you got to figure out another way to hear yes.
Yes, Mama. Yes.
So I knew that was just what we needed to do, and I think we did a pretty damn good job.
You did a great job. Good work. I'm gonna skip over you, Chris, and come back to you. Okay? And gosh, my main man in the trenches. When you're walking down the streets of Harlem and you're from Compton, and you're thinking, wow, this doesn't look like 1989. When you go into Central Park, and the people at Central Park overhear you saying, take out that bush, let's put some trash here. I need some syringes here. Let's take out that light. And the guy from Central Park is like, what is she talking about? Who calms him down? Mackenzie. Can you talk a little bit about the park? And then my favorite piece, the way that you created the homes of these people and the intricacy with which you designed that.
I think the core of everything was research and understanding humans and the human patterns, and especially these boys. And I know that when I first started the job, the plan was to set up this big scout. So when Ava was on the ground, we could take her through and show her as much of what Harlem had to offer, which in a lot of ways was very little. We had to augment so much to make what it needed to be. But that first moment was us mapping out every place that the boys had been all throughout Harlem, and then all throughout the park, and then walking it with Ava DuVernay and Bradford Young, and feeling that path and that energy, which was there, and sadly there. You know, we were filled with sorrow and just observing from a distance the suffering that these boys went through. But I think that was, you know, part of the beginning of our understanding of them, which I think brings me to the next portion of your question, which is, what are these boys' homes like? And how do we tackle that? You know, it is about honoring them, understanding them, observing their humanity, observing their diversity, observing their individuality. Part of the reason we find we have to look at these stories is because people put all of these very different human beings into one version of something that they're afraid of. And so when we get the opportunity to go in their house and create it from scratch on the stage, we want to see where they put their toothbrush. We want to know where their fingerprints are on the wall. We want to see their indentation on their pillow. We want to breathe them in and understand them as deeply as possible. And Ava and I were in that, feeling that.
You took me there. You did a beautiful job with it. Just the little details that meant so much. To the actors too, when they step on set, that it doesn't feel, because all the homes that you see you built those. And because we went into the Schomburg, we went into those spaces, they were too small for us to get our cameras up. It was disruptive to the residents there, so he built all of those homes. What I loved about what you did is the title is When They See Us. And so you allowed us to see them in the spaces where Black boys and Black people are rarely seen, at home in those private moments. And each boy's space was different based on what their background was, but then also the way that they present and the way that we have to perform, you know. A famous poem called We Wear the Mask, right? The mask that we have to wear. And most people do. You have one way at home and another way you present. But if you're considered an outsider or marginalized in the community, in society, there are certain ways that we perform our presence. And so when the boys are in the park, when they're in the precincts, much different than the ways that they are at home and with each other. I want to talk one more piece about this piece that you saw in here, the cell, when they finally meet at the end. We talked a lot about what that should be. And I want you to talk about how we got to just that white, very spare room.
Well, we had been in the precinct for a while, like up until that point when you see it. And in the precinct, we, you know, observe colors, and our delving into colors and what they're doing and how they're affecting you, I think is very potent in the precinct. We have those cold blues. We have these hallways that are, a lighter, like flesh tone that makes you feel uncomfortable. You've got a green in there. All of these, there's precedents in the history of where we find these things. All of that came through research. I want to find the precedent first. We know that this is how some precincts painted their walls, but what is it going to do? How is it going to communicate to the story we're trying to tell? But then the starkness of that cell, not doing that there. And there's little moments in there where we had done research into the energy of different tags, whether it's gang affiliation or just observing suffering etched into the wall, and putting those raw pieces and then keeping it stark and seeing the beauty of these boys juxtaposed to that, separate from any competing energy, I think is, affecting.
Very effective. Beautifully done. So writing, co-writing, and writing with someone is a thing. That is sometimes pleasant and sometimes not. And gosh, I have a good time when I'm writing with you, sir.
Thank you.
We have a good time writing together. This is Michael Starberry, and we wrote episode 4 together. And so I just want to talk to you a little bit about, it was a very short amount of time.
Yeah.
Let's not tell them how short because people will think I'm abusive, okay? It was a very short amount of time. And I caused you in a bit of a frenzy.
Yeah.
And I said, I need you now.
Yeah.
And what did you say and what did you do?
Well, what I said was, of course, I'll hop on it. What did I do after the phone call? I was like, man, I don't know if I can do this. Like, that was the first thing I did when I hung up. I was just like, I don't even know. Like, I don't know. But the subject matter, well, first of all, your passion for it. Hold on, let me just take a time out and say thank you for this. For someone like me, I want to make films, and to be able to hear these stories and how they work, all of this information helps me. Like, hearing from everyone in these different departments, it all helps me, and to be a part of it. So I really appreciate it. Thank you for that. Back to the writing. So yeah, I was a little, shook at first, but
Played it cool.
I'm gonna do that every time you call. I'm not gonna ever tell you that I'm shook right now. So, but you sent me all of the research. You had a great idea for the structure of the story, which I've already told you 1,000 times that I was just with it right away. Just the whole idea of the way 1 through 4 was gonna work. I was with that. But particularly, like part 4, it was there, so I was excited to dig in. All the information was there, and it was a fun challenge.
There were some beautiful things that you brought to life, though. So how many people have seen episode 4? No? A few people? Okay. So in episode 4, it really has to do with Corey Wise, who's, the horrible part of the story. Corey Wise, played by Gerald Jerome, the second boy here, who plays Corey Wise, who went to Rikers at the age of 16. He went immediately to Rikers after they were found guilty. 16 years old. He was hard of hearing in one ear. He had challenges reading. He had a very challenging home life, very little support. He's dropped into Rikers and doesn't come out again for another 13 and a half years. He went directly into an adult prison and was cycled through adult prisons throughout New York State for the next 13 years. When I talked to him and I asked him, how did you survive? How are you standing in front of me? He said, up here. Up here. So he lived a life of the mind. So how do you put together a 1-hour episode with a young black man living a life of the mind while he's trying to survive when he walks out of his cell? So it was this duality of what happens on the inside of the cell, what happens on the outside of the cell. Abuse, assault, horrific things happened to him on the outside, but in the inside, he was struggling and he was trying to get free up here. And so I remember calling you and saying, look, I've got all this here. I know this is going to happen, this is going to happen. And I said, in here something happens. And he's like, huh? And I said, something great, like something interesting, something unexpected happens here. And he's like, yeah, got you.
Yeah.
And I said, you know what, so just play with this section. Like, I don't know, I'm not sure, but call me next week and we'll look at pages. And we split it up, so I said, I'm gonna take this act, you take this, we're gonna trade, you do this, but it was a section that I just couldn't see. And you came back with one of the big moments in the film, and I remember reading these pages and thinking, where the heck did he get that from? And gosh, that's exactly what we needed. So do you want to talk about your favorite thing that you put into Twitter search to see if people are talking about it, and so many people love this moment?
Yeah, so I added a chia pet moment. And yeah, it was, you know, I'm always, it's important to me that we somehow kind of bridge this empathy gap. For me, these kind of, you know, these things that everybody knows about, like these commercialized things in this moment where it's just a simple thing that everybody can relate to. It's just a simple thing. It feels like a chia pet can bring us together. Now, and again, like that moment of levity for me was a moment of what I'm learning from when people talk about it was a moment of relief for them. It's just like, oh my God, like I didn't know I needed him to have that chia pet so bad, you know? And, you know, and so for me, it's always going to be like, it's important that we see that these guys are human and that they have emotions, and like a thing like that when you haven't even been able to see the outside world for God knows how long is going to move you. And the friendship between him and Robert.
Yeah. You know, I thought it was brilliantly done, and I loved it, and we leaned into it. You know, one of the things that makes me so sad, I hear myself say it, and I just heard Michael say it, is it's important to show that these boys were human. Can you imagine having to make movies and having to have the duty as artists, everyone on this stage, all colors and genders, and say, we have to prove that black boys are human? We have to assert that their presence is valuable, that we have to humanize them. I hear myself say that. Don't call them the Central Park Five. Call them by their names. Let's not let them be stripped of their humanity. That's what we do to people behind bars. They're just numbers, they're just statistics. But what this is supposed to show is that these are beating hearts and pulses and families and memories and real people with real lives. And how dare we have to humanize another human being? Who are we to be able to strip that from someone? So that was the collaboration that this all was. Huge part of the empathy machine and the humanizing that we do comes through music. This was so key that we'd be able to find someone and I'd be able to work with someone that was going to create a soundscape with music that was so dense, that was so muscular, that was so symbolic of the beating hearts of these boys and their families, that it overwhelms you in moments and it saves you with moments. And I'm forever indebted to you, Chris Bowers. I really, truly am. You sacrificed so much for this. You really did. So I just want you to talk to me a little bit about, you know, gosh, I felt like I saw you every day at some point. And I remember you would bring me cues, and I would give you notes, and you would just look at me with that face and say, yes, I will go back and I will do more. And you pushed, and you pushed, and you pulled, and you wrangled this thing into shape. The emotional moments in the film where you had to really get through some tough subject matter, I'd come to you sometimes and I was like, you gotta help the audience through this. We're gonna lose them. You know, they're gonna be crying through this, you gotta keep them steady. How are you managing the emotional beats with the actual tactical work of just having to get us from scene to scene? Where did you go? And what did you do at home when you left me? Because you just came back with magic. What happened to me?
There was a lot of crying for multiple reasons. I mean, the first thing was just responding to all of them. I mean, like you said, hearing how much effort and love and attention was put into every aspect of the show, I felt as I was working on it. So there's scenes where, like the scene in episode 4 with Niecy Nash and Marcy and Dolores and Marcy and Corey, like as I was writing, my process usually is I would watch it a few times without any music, just to kind of like get into it, and then I'd just start improvising to what I was watching and with a scene like that, I had to watch it for maybe like 5-6 hours to get the first pass through, and at least once an hour I was like emotional watching it, and I think that type of connection to the work, or the work connecting to me so much, is what made it so that like everything that I was improvising, or any of the ideas that I was pulling from, were just trying to make me feel the way that the show was already making me feel, and trying to make sure that I was, helping where it needed help, or staying out of the way where we needed space and all of that. And then I think the beautiful thing about working with you was just that I would bring those first ideas in, and then you were so specific with what you wanted to feel, but you weren't prescriptive, as you always said, with how to do that. And that was such a free experience, because there were times where, like the scene that Michelle mentioned, where Antron walks out, and that scene was one we had to do so many times, because you're like, when I watch it before, every single time he walks, and as soon as they embrace, I get emotional, and for some reason this isn't really doing that. So then we'd have to like go back and figure out, well, maybe if we like create some sort of pace and momentum on the entire time that we're walking up, and once they do hug, have a release there and all that kind of stuff, and then we'd have those conversations, and you'd be like, I don't want to be prescriptive, so however you want to do it, let me know. But that was great, because then it just allows me to figure out how I want to, again, go deep, do a deep emotional dive, and figure out how I want to represent that musically. But the shape and the structure is all just because of how much you knew you wanted to feel things in certain places, and the pace that you wanted to create. Yeah.
Well, you did it so beautifully, and I see you all here, and you all don't know each other, but I know each of you. I know how your music, Chris, is handled by Joe and Susan and everyone else that's working with dialogue and sound and mixing and sound design and the levels, excuse me, in the mix. I understand how source and score are working together, and how the two of you, Aaron and Chris, had to balance each other out at times. Akeem and Michelle never met, but the ways in which the spaces are being cut into picture, and how that's going back and forth, and you never meet, because you've rapped when she starts, and she's in LA cutting while we're on the set, and no one meets Michael Starberry. We keep him in a closet, right? And then Michael Starberry, he wrote the whole thing, and how, then you have someone like Barry, who's just consistently knowing everything and being by my side through the whole process. And it was a hard one, buddy, but I appreciate you.
Hey,
There's nowhere else where I say it. I just want to let you know, 1 second, just want to let you know. I have not told you enough, but you were the first one in and the last one out with me. And I appreciate you. Every tussle, every Barry, I need Barry, help me. Barry, let's do this. You will always have that look on your face. So thank you very much. You're a great producer, sir. You're a great producer. For you?
Oh, I was just gonna say, I live in Minnesota, not a closet.
Copy that. Minnesota or a closet, got you. So with that, I will ask our friend Chris Bowers to play you a little something from the film, and the rest of us will depart with our thanks for watching When They See Us, and our hope that when you watch it not as a piece of entertainment, but as a piece of information about what's going on out there in our names, our taxpayer dollars, what we ignore allows this kind of thing to happen, and hopefully we can be more aware, raise our voices, and try to prevent things like this from happening again. Thank you so much. Thank you.
Thank you guys so much. Thank you. Thank you, Ava.
Ladies and gentlemen, please follow the exit signs to your left and join us in the reception area. Thank you.